The widowed rancher had learned how to live with ghosts long before the world decided to test him again. Caleb Holt rose before dawn each morning, not because he needed to, but because the silence before the sun came up was the only time his memories stayed quiet. His ranch stretched wide and lonely along the edge of the Wyoming plains, acres of dry grass and stubborn earth that mirrored the life he carried inside his chest, enduring, scarred, and uncomplaining. 10 years had passed since the night his wife, Eliza, vanished into the storm and never came back. 10 years since the lawman stopped searching, since the neighbors stopped whispering, since the preacher stopped praying aloud for a miracle. They had called her dead without a body, swallowed by the river when the bridge gave way, carried off by floodwater and darkness. Caleb had stood on that riverbank until his boots filled with mud and his voice broke from shouting her name. But the river never answered. Over time, grief hardened into routine. He buried himself in work, rebuilt fences, raised cattle, fixed roofs, and slept in a bed that stayed cold no matter the season. People in town called him strong, but strength was just what happened when a man had no other choice. Love, though, that was the wound that never closed. He still spoke to Eliza some nights, low and careful, as if she might hear him through the walls of memory. He told her about the calves born in spring, about the way the cottonwood leaned more each year, about how the world had kept moving even though his heart had chosen to stand still. That morning began like any other, with dust on his hands and the smell of hay in the air. Caleb was repairing a broken gate near the barn when he noticed a strange stillness rolling across the land, the kind that made animals uneasy. The horses shifted, ears twitching, and the dog lifted its head with a soft whine. Caleb straightened, wiping sweat from his brow, and followed the line of his own unease toward the long dirt road that led to the ranch. At first he thought the heat was playing tricks on his eyes. Then he saw them, two small figures walking side by side, their steps slow but determined, dust clinging to their worn shoes. They were little girls, no more than 6 or 7, holding hands as if that alone could keep the world from breaking them apart. Their dresses were faded, hair tangled by travel, faces smudged with dirt and something heavier than dust, fear mixed with hope. Caleb felt a sharp, unexpected ache in his chest. Children didn't come out here. Not alone, not ever. He took a step forward, then another, his mind racing through every terrible possibility. Had they run away? Were they lost, hurt? He raised his hand and called out gently, not wanting to scare them. The girls stopped at the edge of the property, staring at him with wide, searching eyes. For a moment, the wind picked up, carrying with it the smell of rain and old memories. Caleb's breath caught, though. He didn't yet know why. The girls walked closer, still holding hands, their steps in perfect rhythm. Up close, Caleb could see that they were identical. Same dark hair, same solemn brown eyes, same small scar just above the left eyebrow. As if fate itself had marked them as one mirrored soul split in two. His heart began to pound, a strange, unreasonable fear creeping up his spine. He knelt so he wouldn't tower over them, forcing his voice to stay calm. "You girls lost?" he asked. They exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between them, then looked back at him together. One of them squeezed the other's hand tighter. "No, sir," the girl on the right said softly. Her voice was steady, too steady for a child who had walked this far alone. "We're not lost," Caleb frowned. "Where's your family?" The girl on the left tilted her head, studying his face like she was searching for something she'd only seen in pictures. "We came to find you," she said. Caleb felt the world tilt. "Find me?" he echoed, a nervous laugh slipping out before he could stop it. "You got the wrong ranch, sweetheart." The girl shook her head. Both of them did. Then together, as if they had practiced the words 1,000 times, they spoke. "No, we don't," they said. "We finally found you, Daddy." The word hit him like a rifle shot. Daddy. Caleb froze, every muscle locking as if he'd been struck by lightning. His mind rejected it instantly, tried to laugh it off, tried to push it away, but his heart betrayed him, slamming hard against his ribs, pounding with a terror he hadn't felt since the night Eliza disappeared. He stared at the girls, really stared at them now, and something ancient and impossible stirred inside him. The shape of their eyes, the curve of their smiles, a dimple on the left cheek that mirrored one he'd kissed a lifetime ago. His mouth went dry. You shouldn't say things like that," he managed, his voice rough. "Who told you that?" The girls didn't look scared. They didn't look confused. They looked sad for him. Mama did, one of them said quietly. The world narrowed to a single point. Your mama? Caleb whispered. His knees felt weak. What's your mama's name? The girls spoke it together, clear as a bell cutting through fog. Eliza. The sound of her name after 10 years was enough to shatter him. Caleb swayed, one hand gripping his knee to keep himself upright, his breath coming fast and shallow. The ranch, the sky, the years of grief, all of it, spun as one impossible truth began to claw its way toward the surface. Eliza was dead. She had to be. He had mourned her, buried her without a body, and yet these girls stood before him, flesh and bone and memory, calling him daddy with her voice echoing in their words. Caleb forced himself to stand, though every instinct screamed that if he didn't move, if he didn't breathe, this vision might vanish like smoke. He swallowed hard and nodded toward the house. You girls must be hungry, he said, buying himself time, grounding himself in something practical. Let's get you some water. They followed him without hesitation, as if they'd known all along he wouldn't turn them away. As they walked, Caleb's mind raced through the years he thought he understood. Eliza had been pregnant when she disappeared, barely showing, just beginning to dream out loud about names and futures. Twins had never crossed his mind. Neither had survival. He had watched the river take her wagon, felt the rain soak through his coat, heard the final crack of wood as the bridge gave way. No one survived that night. No one except, apparently, the woman who lived on in his heart and the children standing in his shadow. As they reached the porch, one of the girls slipped her small hand into his without asking. The contact sent a shock through him so strong he nearly stopped walking. Her hand fit there too well. The door creaked open, and as Caleb ushered them inside, the past came with them, uninvited and unstoppable. Whatever truth had been buried all these years was awake, now, and it had just called him daddy. Inside the house, time seemed to fold in on itself. The cabin hadn't changed much in 10 years. Same rough-hewn table, same iron stove, same faded quilt Eliza had stitched during the winter they first moved in. Caleb noticed the girls looking around with quiet curiosity, their eyes lingering on details as if something here belonged to them long before this moment. He poured water into tin cups, his hands trembling despite every effort to steady them. The girls drank politely, small sips, like children taught to be careful with precious things. Caleb watched them from the corner of his eye, his heart caught between denial and a truth too heavy to lift all at once. He cleared his throat. You said your mama sent you, he began slowly. Where is she now? The girls exchanged that same knowing look again, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across their faces. She's sick, one said. Real sick, the other nodded. She told us if anything happened. If she couldn't get better, we had to come find you. Caleb felt the room tilt again, sick, alive, the words tangled together in his mind. He sat heavily at the table, suddenly aware of how old his body felt, how long he had carried grief like a second spine. How did you know where to find me? He asked. The girl closest to him reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a folded scrap of paper, worn thin from being opened and closed too many times. Caleb recognized Eliza's handwriting before he even took it from her. Small, careful letters slanted slightly to the right. His fingers shook as he unfolded it. Caleb Holt, Holt Ranch west of the Platte River. Beneath it, in lighter ink, a single line, he will keep you safe. Caleb pressed the paper to his chest, his eyes burning. Eliza had planned this. Somehow she had known the day might come when these children would need him. The girls told their story in pieces, each detail delivered carefully like stepping stones across deep water. They had lived in a small settlement far south near the edge of the desert, moving often, never staying long. Their mother never spoke of the past except in soft fragments, of a ranch, of a man who loved the land more than words, of a storm that took everything. She had raised them alone, working whatever job she could, keeping them hidden when trouble came too close. Caleb listened, barely breathing, his hands clenched tight in his lap. Every word filled in a blank he'd carried for a decade. Eliza must have survived the flood, swept miles downstream, injured, alone, carrying unborn children. The thought hollowed him out. Why didn't she come back? He asked, the question breaking free before he could stop it. The girls looked down. She said she was afraid, one whispered. She thought you believed she was dead. She didn't know how to come back after so long. Fear, shame, survival. Caleb closed his eyes. He could almost hear Eliza's voice apologizing even while bleeding. The idea of her choosing distance to protect him or herself hurt more than the lie of death ever had. As the day wore on, the girls relaxed, their guard slowly lowering. They explored the house, touching objects with reverence. A carved wooden horse Caleb had made years ago. A framed photograph of Eliza smiling in the sunlight. One of the girls picked it up carefully. "Mama looks happy there," she said. Caleb swallowed hard. "She was," he replied. Outside, clouds gathered low and heavy, mirroring the weight inside his chest. He prepared a simple meal, watching the girls eat with an appetite that spoke of long days without enough. Each bite felt like a promise he was silently making to feed them, protect them, never let them walk alone again. Yet beneath the tenderness, fear gnawed at him. If Eliza was alive, then everything he thought he knew was wrong. If she was sick, then time might already be running out. That night, as the girls slept curled together on the old bed, Caleb sat at the table with the letter clutched in his hand, staring into the dark. He wasn't a widower anymore, not truly. He was a husband who had lost 10 years, a father who had just met his children, and a man standing on the edge of a past that refused to stay buried. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, and Caleb knew with chilling certainty that the storm he survived years ago was only the beginning. Sleep never came that night, only memories and questions circling like restless cattle before a storm. Caleb sat in the dim glow of the lantern, listening to the slow, even breathing of the twin girls in the next room, letting the sound anchor him to the present. Every few minutes he caught himself standing, moving toward the doorway just to make sure they were still there, that they hadn't vanished like a dream carried off by dawn. They looked so small in that bed, knees drawn up, hands clasped together even in sleep, or as if the world might split them apart if they let go. Caleb rested his palm against the doorframe, his chest aching with a tenderness he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He thought of Eliza alone in a strange land, raising 2 children while believing he had already mourned her. He wondered how many nights she'd sat awake like this, worrying, planning, surviving. Guilt pressed down on him from all sides. Guilt for believing she was gone. Guilt for building a life around absence. Guilt for every birthday and scraped knee he had never known about. Yet beneath it all, a fierce resolve began to take shape. Whatever mistakes had been made, whatever fear had kept them apart, he would not lose them again. At first light, the ranch stirred awake, unaware that its quiet routines were about to change forever. The girls rose early as if shaped by hardship, helping themselves to water, sitting neatly at the table without being asked. Caleb cooked breakfast, eggs, biscuits, whatever he could find, his movements awkward but determined. He wasn't sure how to be a father, not like this, not all at once, but instinct guided him better than thought ever could. As they ate, he asked their names. "We're Lily," one said, pointing to herself. "And Rose," the other added with a small smile. The names struck him hard. Eliza had once spoken them aloud while lying in the grass, laughing at how they sounded together. Caleb's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "They're beautiful," he said, and meant more than the words could hold. When he told them he needed to take them back to their mother, fear flashed in their eyes. "She's scared," Rose said. "She thinks you'll be angry." Caleb shook his head slowly. "I could never be angry at her for surviving," he said. "Or at you for existing." The girls relaxed then, a fragile trust settling between them like a promise. By midday, preparations were underway. Caleb packed supplies, checked the truck, and saddled a horse just in case the roads turned rough. Each task steadied him, gave shape to the chaos roaring in his mind. He knelt in front of the girls, meeting their eyes. "We're going to bring your mama home," he said quietly. "All of you." Lily hesitated. "What if she's too sick to travel?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then I'll come to her," he replied. The certainty in his own voice surprised him. For 10 years he had lived as a man resigned to loss. Now he felt something else entirely, purpose sharpened by love. As they climbed into the truck, Caleb glanced once more at the house, at the life he had built around grief. He knew he might not return the same man who was leaving. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, leading back through memory, fear, and truth. But for the first time since the storm that took Eliza from him, Caleb didn't feel alone. The twins sat beside him, small hands resting trustingly on his arm. And as the engine roared to life, Caleb Holt drove toward a past he was finally ready to or as if the world might split them apart if they let go. Caleb rested his palm against the doorframe, his chest aching with a tenderness he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. He thought of Eliza alone in a strange land, raising 2 children while believing he had already mourned her. He wondered how many nights she'd sat awake like this, worrying, planning, surviving. Guilt pressed down on him from all sides. Guilt for believing she was gone. Guilt for building a life around absence. Guilt for every birthday and scraped knee he had never known about. Yet beneath it all, a fierce resolve began to take shape. Whatever mistakes had been made, whatever fear had kept them apart, he would not lose them again. At first light, the ranch stirred awake, unaware that its quiet routines were about to change forever. The girls rose early as if shaped by hardship, helping themselves to water, sitting neatly at the table without being asked. Caleb cooked breakfast, eggs, biscuits, whatever he could find, his movements awkward but determined. He wasn't sure how to be a father, not like this, not all at once, but instinct guided him better than thought ever could. As they ate, he asked their names. "We're Lily," one said, pointing to herself. "And Rose," the other added with a small smile. The names struck him hard. Eliza had once spoken them aloud while lying in the grass, laughing at how they sounded together. Caleb's hand tightened around his coffee cup. "They're beautiful," he said, and meant more than the words could hold. When he told them he needed to take them back to their mother, fear flashed in their eyes. "She's scared," Rose said. "She thinks you'll be angry." Caleb shook his head slowly. "I could never be angry at her for surviving," he said. "Or at you for existing." The girls relaxed then, a fragile trust settling between them like a promise. By midday, preparations were underway. Caleb packed supplies, checked the truck, and saddled a horse just in case the roads turned rough. Each task steadied him, gave shape to the chaos roaring in his mind. He knelt in front of the girls, meeting their eyes. "We're going to bring your mama home," he said quietly. "All of you." Lily hesitated. "What if she's too sick to travel?" Caleb's jaw tightened. "Then I'll come to her," he replied. The certainty in his own voice surprised him. For 10 years he had lived as a man resigned to loss. Now he felt something else entirely, purpose sharpened by love. As they climbed into the truck, Caleb glanced once more at the house, at the life he had built around grief. He knew he might not return the same man who was leaving. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, leading back through memory, fear, and truth. But for the first time since the storm that took Eliza from him, Caleb didn't feel alone. The twins sat beside him, small hands resting trustingly on his arm. And as the engine roared to life, Caleb Holt drove toward a past he was finally ready to reclaim, whatever it demanded of him. The road south unspooled beneath the truck's tires like a long, unforgiving confession. Caleb drove with both hands tight on the wheel, his eyes fixed ahead, afraid that if he looked too closely at the girls beside him, the truth of them might overwhelm him all over again. Lily and Rose sat quietly, pressed shoulder to shoulder, watching the land change, from rolling plains to harsher ground where grass thinned, and the sky seemed wider, more indifferent. Every mile carried Caleb farther from the life he had, shaped around grief and closer to the years he had lost. He asked careful questions as they traveled, about the places they had lived, the work their mother had done, the moments when she had smiled despite everything. The girls answered in small, honest fragments. Eliza had been strong, they said. She worked kitchens, cleaned homes, mended clothes, always moving before roots could form. Sometimes she cried at night when she thought they were asleep. Sometimes she held them and whispered apologies for a man she loved and a life that never came back to claim her. Each detail cut deep, but Caleb welcomed the pain. It meant Eliza had lived. It meant his love had not disappeared into the river after all. By late afternoon, the truck rattled down a dirt road so narrow it looked more like a suggestion than a path. The girls stiffened, their fingers curling into the fabric of their dresses. "It's close," Rose said softly. Caleb slowed, heart hammering. The settlement appeared, like a wound in the earth, several weathered buildings, clinging together against the wind, roofs sagging, windows patched with whatever could be found. This was where Eliza had survived. This was where she had hidden. Caleb parked and stepped out, the heat hitting him like a wall. He took one deep breath before opening the passenger door. "Stay close," he told the girls, his voice gentle but firm. They nodded, each taking one of his hands. The simple weight of them steadied him more than any prayer ever had. People watched as they walked, curious, wary, accustomed to strangers passing through but rarely staying. Caleb felt eyes on his back, felt the tension in the air like a held breath. Somewhere nearby a dog barked, somewhere else a door creaked open. They found Eliza in a small, low building at the far edge of the settlement. The girls stopped walking. "That's where Mama is," Lily whispered. Caleb's chest tightened. The structure looked fragile, barely standing, its door scarred by years of use. He hesitated for one terrifying moment, the weight of a decade pressing down on him. What if she didn't want to see him? What if she was already gone? Rose squeezed his hand. "She's inside," she said, as if sensing his fear. Caleb nodded once and stepped forward. The door opened slowly, revealing a dim room that smelled of herbs and dust. A woman lay on a narrow bed, her hair streaked with gray but her face unmistakable, even pale and thin. Eliza was Eliza. Caleb's breath left him in a shudder. For a heartbeat the world went silent. Then her eyes opened. They widened, disbelief crashing into recognition. "Caleb?" she whispered, his name trembling on her lips like a prayer finally answered. He crossed the room in 3 steps, dropping to his knees beside her bed, unable to speak. Tears blurred his vision as he took her hand, warm and real. "I'm here," he said hoarsely. "I should have been here all along." Eliza wept then, years of fear and loneliness breaking free. "I thought you were done with me," she said between sobs. "I thought you'd moved on." Caleb shook his head fiercely. "I buried an empty grave," he replied. "I never stopped loving you." The girls hovered at the doorway, watching their parents with solemn relief. Eliza reached out to them and they rushed to her side, climbing carefully onto the bed. Caleb watched, his heart splitting open and knitting itself back together all at once. This reunion was not clean or simple. It was messy, painful, stitched together with regret and fragile hope, but it was real. And as Caleb looked at the woman he had mourned and the daughters he had just met, he understood that survival was only the beginning. Now came the harder work, healing. What the storm had broken and facing the truth of why Eliza had stayed away for so long.